think there's like two types of people. There's those of us who end up in HR and those of us who who have, pursued the discipline. I was very much like, I ended up. But when I stopped and thought about it and thought about the role, I was like, okay, this job is actually an N of 1, and it's versus like being one of 20 in a development program, one of 30, 40. And I can see how seriously the organization takes this program. So like, how cool to be able to early in my career be in an influencing role. In HR, as an HR business partner, it's your job to say the thing. And to say the thing in a really balanced way. The talent world is small. We'll cross paths one way or another. And like better to be like a net exporter of great talent than like, let someone just kind of then not facilitate that conversation, because then at least you can be prepared for it. My general philosophy is like, have the humility to like know what you don't know and where you can learn that from other people, and approach it with an interest and a curiosity about like the variety of the portfolio that you have as a chief people officer. I was like, man, that's cool. Okay, maybe I want to do that.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Leaders in Talent podcast. I'm excited to have Lizzie Weilburg here on the podcast. Lizzie, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Lizzie is a senior talent manager at Coinbase and currently oversees the recruitment efforts for Coinbase consumer and international businesses. Before joining Coinbase, Lizzie was an HR business partner at Citadel. And what was interesting about Lizzie's career is that she started actually at Morningstar in customer service and went on to lead their overall development program. Lizzie, we've met probably 6 months ago at one of the talent leader dinners that I host on a monthly basis in New York, in Chelsea. And it was a week before you officially moved to London to start leading the international business at Coinbase.
Right before I shipped off.
Yeah, like literally a week. And I was so grateful for you to like make time in a pretty hectic last week and, be present at the dinner. And when I came to London, we had a cup of coffee and we chatted for a while. And one thing that really stuck with me during our conversation, and was also one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you for this podcast, is that you outspokenly said, I want to become a CPO.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite rare in the people that I talk to that are so clear in terms of their ambition, their career goals, and also articulate that to people. And now even today, when I ask you, it's like, are you comfortable saying that during our podcast, right? Because I feel that with goal setting, especially with ambition, a lot of people keep it for themselves out of maybe the fear of failure, or maybe being too overly ambitious, or like, what if it doesn't happen? It's like there are a lot of, it's rare actually that people say that.
Oh gosh, that's a good point. You're like, now I'm like,
But the beauty is, honestly, and this is what I keep also telling my team, and also something that I learned from certain mentors, it all starts with you articulating what that looks like, right? Because once you have a clear goal or clear plan, other people, one, will know about it and will support you, right? That's one. Two, also for yourself, by saying it out loud, you make this almost accountability and commitment to yourself and others around you as well. It's like, hey, this is what I'm striving for. Whether I'm going to make that happen or not, but this is my intention. And it creates so much clarity in someone's career, right? And it creates also so much clarity for me as a leader, as a manager, when people come up to me, hey, in the next 5 years, I want to become a talent director. It's like amazing. Okay, I know that someone's ambitious. I know that someone wants to do this. What can we or can we not do in order to help someone progress in their career? So taking a step back, Lizzie, when did this clear thought around I want to become a CPO crystallize for you, and like how's that journey taking shape?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of the very first time I like uttered that statement and decided I'd just like express it into the universe. But I think exactly to your point, Adrian, for me, like a lot of saying it is holding myself accountable to the standard. And I'll be the first to say, like, I could be totally wrong about that. My career might take a completely different direction. But from all the facts that I've gathered today, like that is what I want to drive towards. And I think it has helped me really meaningfully in my career, like use my mentors and leaders around me as partners and like in signaling to them to what I want. I think it's helped me kind of build the path along the way. So I think it's been really gratifying in that regard. I think for me, like the moment that I realized I wanted to be a chief people officer was like working with great chief people officers. So like ironically, I started my career, like you mentioned, in customer support. I was in a development
Yeah.
program at an investment research company, answering the phones, helping financial advisors use our products. Moved into a manager role, and the person who was leading recruitment for that program at the time tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, I think you should come join my team. I think you'd be great at it. I think you'd love it." And I was like, I don't want to be in HR.
Yeah.
It had just never occurred to me. I think there's like two types of people. There's those of us who end up in HR and those of us who who have, pursued the discipline. I was very much like,
Yeah.
I ended up. But when I stopped and thought about it and thought about the role, I was like, okay, this job is actually an N of one, and it's versus like being one of 20 in a development program, one of 30, 40. And I can see how seriously the organization takes this program. So like how cool to be able to early in my career be in an influencing role. So I went for it.
Yeah.
And I started campus recruiting and I absolutely just loved it. And
Yeah.
I think that the reason it resonated with me so deeply is I was like, it's so interesting to see how important people and talent are to an organization and have that lens to like how decisions unfold from a business perspective and how
Yeah.
important people are. And the chief people officer at that company at the time, and I've been very fortunate to work with like others who I consider like some of my best mentors, like just inspired me as leaders. And I thought like the variety of the portfolio that you have as a chief people officer, I was like, man, that's cool. Okay, maybe I want to do that. And then haven't looked back since.
Yeah. But was that also like when you entered that first role of recruitment that you immediately were like that CPO role? I don't know how to get that, but like
Yeah.
that's where I want to go.
Well, I think that like I spent a lot of that first year or so, or first couple of years, just like trying to pay really close attention to the people around me and what they were doing and like how they showed up as leaders, what their scope was, just because you're
Yeah.
relatively new to the workforce, you're understanding how companies work for the first time. And as I looked around, I was like, okay, right, would I want this person's job? What I want, like, what does this person's job seem like, feel like, look like? I've always been an ambitious person and wanted to be a leader of an organization. I think that was just like, I think I came into the workforce knowing, I want to be important in some way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the more proximity I had to kind of those varieties of different roles, like I think really what resonated with me the most is like seeing the variety of that day to day and like how a leader at that level in the people space in particular toggles from, anything from like what are challenges that our employees are facing on the ground in a different geography. We've acquired a business here and they're having a hard time integrating, to like, what is our compensation strategy? Like watching her kind of toggle across all those different threads, I was like, man, that's a cool job. And kind of just tried to build that fact pattern of like, what are the things that I can see and observe? Like, what are the roles that the people who are much more senior to me are playing? And like, where would I want to see myself fit into that mix?
Were you already so outspoken as you are now at that time, or is that something that's you started doing later in your career?
I think that came later for me in my career. I do remember like I in job interviews, I would say probably at like a midpoint of my career, like I expressed that kind of career goal to people as just a means of anchoring. Like here are the intentional steps I'm trying to take on the journey that I'm building for myself. I think it's like I find it helpful in signaling ambition and just like showing people like here's where I want to go.
Yeah.
But I don't think that at that point in my career, and even like when I interviewed for the job at Citadel, when I left Morningstar, I don't know if I was quite so direct. I think that some of that also like, working for great leaders who have coached me to like take up space and feel comfortable kind of expressing my goals and what I'm trying to drive, I think
Yeah.
has helped that a lot.
Can you give me an example of like a leader or a mentor that you've worked with that's, really made that profound impact on you on getting clarity, on supporting you, and how that came to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I today work for the chief people officer who I work for at Citadel as well, Brock. Biggest
Yeah,
fan in the world of this man. I
yeah,
think he's been incredibly influential in my career. Um, and we had a great conversation actually not that long ago about like saying the hard thing to people who are senior to you and using that in how to do that in a clear and direct and objective way. And the importance of doing that because, and part of his coaching to me was like, Lizzie, you have to be able to do this if you want to do my job someday. You have to be able to go to your manager, go to your leader and say hard things. And I think that so I share that as an example of like, I think it's incredibly cool to have leaders who coach you by playing back to you like the career goals you've articulated for yourselves
yeah.
and like tying together like here's why this is important, this is going to help you along the journey that you want to go on. I think that speaks incredibly highly of LJ's leadership and the type of organization and like people team that an environment that he wants to facilitate and create.
Was it Craig that helped you articulate this vision, or did you come to Craig and say, "Hey, one day, Craig, I hope to be in your position"? Like how, help me understand that dynamic, because the reason why I would love to understand this is I want to empower either leaders or people that are ambitious to like make that next step. And in terms of how did that work? How does this play out for you?
I think that I'll maybe give you like a little bit of a different example of
Yeah.
how my leaders and managers have helped shape that for me along the way. So, for example, I'm thinking back to one of the managers that I've had while at Coinbase, who I think has been incredibly helpful in me building my brand as a leader and at the time as an HR business partner. And she always says, like, in HR as an HR business partner, it's your job to say the thing, and to say the thing in a really balanced way. So, sometimes like as a leader, you're often in a position where you have to share uncomfortable or hard news. And I think like
Yeah.
being a big believer in doing that in, like I said, an objective way. So not making it about emotions or not making an accusation, but saying like, here's the impact of this thing and here's why it matters. I think a lot of times like it's easier to build that muscle of saying hard things when it doesn't pertain to yourself, when it's not like asking for something in your career. But I think building the muscle and the way that some of my managers have helped me do that, whether I think like, the two taglines I would give you are like, saying the thing, but also being willing to take up space, and building a brand for yourself by being able to say like, look, I'm here. Like, I think it's almost indirect versus direct, the ways in which we show up and like lead in a meeting. But a lot of times, you got a bunch of people on a call, you're moving in a direction. It might be a sensitive subject. Adrian feels differently than Lizzie feels about this, and that coming in. And so, like, your role in that is to take up space and command the conversation, and drive it in the direction of like, here's what we need to accomplish. And I think having people who can support you and like building a level of comfort of doing that,
Yeah.
then you get the muscle memory of doing that a bit. And I think it makes it easier to be like, right, okay, I've learned these skills. How do I then feel empowered to say, I know how to demonstrate my value and I want your support in this. And like, help me think about, here's how I'm thinking about this thing. I'd love to get your input as it pertains to my own career development. So I think
Yeah.
like building it in a business sense helped make it easier for me to do it from a career development sense.
So good. You remind me of Google did this big research in 2014 about management, like how can managers be better leaders? And it came after many hours and many months of deep research in terms of their organization. They actually found out that out of the 8 traits of being a good manager and leader, the first 2 are the most critical. And the first one seems, at least to me, was obvious, is be a good coach, be a good mentor, and hold a mirror for your
Mhm.
employees versus this is what you should be doing, right? Like let people figure out the answers themselves. Don't give them the fish, teach them how to
Yes.
fish, right? Like
Yes.
the obvious one. The second one surprised me actually, and these first 2 were the most critical. The second one is to help with career progression.
Mm.
And that one really surprised me because I hadn't even thought about that was such a critical role as a manager and leader, right? Even in a small organization, even in a big organization, if
Mhm.
you have those questions with the people that report into you, whether you can make them a reality or not, but like to support them in that sense, that is what distinguishes a good manager from a great manager.
I think that's so spot on. And because, well, to me, it's actually almost not surprising because, you know, people always say like people don't leave companies, they leave managers. Like,
Correct.
I
Yeah.
think that at the end of the day, like people want to feel like they have an advocate and someone looking out for them and supporting them. And like, I'm a believer in we are all like, no one's going to be a bigger champion of your career than you are. Like, it's on you to drive that for yourself. But if you have leaders who kind of like make that safe and engage you in that conversation, I think it helps a lot of people feel comfortable putting focus on something that is, of course, important to all of us. But I'm so curious, like, uh, how do you feel like you've created a culture as a CEO and as a leader for many years? Like, what are some of the things you do to create a culture of that to like make it comfortable for people to speak up in what they're seeking in their careers?
I think it's a very good question. I don't we we're good at the performance evaluation cycles. We're pretty good at that. We at least have written down like what could a career as a sourcer, coordinator, recruiter at Metro look like.
Yep.
I recently found out about this research and really, did a deep dive in it. I don't think we've empowered our managers as well as we could now knowing the research to empower them to have those conversations.
Hmm.
And we're like a 60 people organization, right? So career and making that next step is harder compared to an organization like Coinbase as an example, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so many branches where you can go and like things
Hmm.
that you can do. Yet we still need to have that conversation because if people say, hey, I want to be an account lead or talent director, and maybe in our company, we don't have anything available because of the size and the skill of our organization, at least we should be having that conversation so that we know when someone is ready for that next step, we don't get surprised when someone wants to leave. We can actually make that a very organic process. The beauty is now we're growing super rapidly. So all of a sudden, all of these windows of opportunities are popping up and we are actually promoting people based on their ambition
Yeah.
and the work that they've been doing, right? So it is actually it's actually happening,
Yeah.
but it's something that I'm working through with our head of HR right now.
Yeah.
Performance cycles are coming up in January to really make sure that we're asking these questions, that people feel supported, and then also that they see that there's a potential path for progression.
Yeah.
One of the things that we got back from it's interesting actually. One of the things that we got back from our sourcers in particular is that they feel that there's a glass ceiling as a
Hmm.
sourcer to develop because they feel like, hey, if I want to develop my career, I actually need to become a recruiter, talent partner. We call them talent partner within our
Sure.
organization, which is not the ambition of every sourcer within our company.
Hmm.
And it's something that we're now like working through. Is like, okay, so what would it mean to be a 10 or 15 plus years of experience source, because we have people like sources that have been with us for 4 or 5 and even 6 years, right? Like,
Hmm.
what does that next step then look like versus being an individual contributor, and also how we set up our account teams? And
Yeah.
at least we need to give them clarity for them to understand, hey, if I want to progress, I need to do X, Y, Z, or if I want to progress in a particular field, maybe then this is not the right company anymore. And I
Yeah.
think it's our job and our role as leaders to be frank and to be honest about it. Talk about
Yeah.
maybe the harder things or the fears, like, oh my God, someone might leave, right?
Yeah.
Because of that conversation. But
Yeah.
the worst is actually what you have is that people might stay and are demotivated because they're like,
Yep.
oh, it's
Yep.
like that's the retractors. So yeah.
Totally. No, I think you just hit on like 2 points that I think are so important. One being like, look, I also think we all should not be so naive to think that like people's career development is limited to the company they work at that moment in
Yeah.
time, right? Like to your point, if the next step in someone's career is going to end up being something external because like we at the company can't offer them the thing that they're looking for, then we should champion them going on to do great things. Like, way better than I do. The talent world is small. We'll cross paths one way or another. And like better to be like a net exporter of great talent than like, let someone just kind of then not facilitate that conversation, because then at least you can be prepared for it. But I think the other point you made that's so important is like career development doesn't always have to be like the promotion or the next thing, or, doesn't mean you have to be a manager. Like a lot of people I think are really, especially what I've found in talent, is people like who are experts in the craft, love what they do, and they want to continue to be like dynamo ICs. And I think like we should, then it's on us as managers to say, okay, how do I give you different and new challenges within that remit that I know you love? What are the things you want to push? And how do we reward that so that you continue to stay happy and engaged and feel like you're getting what you need out of it? It doesn't have to look the way I want. Like, you don't have to want to be a chief people officer or even a people manager to be an incredible talent and asset to the organization.
Yeah, no, such a good point. Lizzie, how do you do this now with your own people that are reporting into you? Are you having those conversations? Like, tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, totally. I think look, I love to see when people like, when my directs will come to me pounding the table, be like, hey, can we have the career development conversation? I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. But I also think it's like, it's my job to create a space for that, and strike the right balance, right? Like I think whenever I've taken on new direct reports, like I try and initiate the conversation early on, and even just to plant the seed to say, hey, this is something I want to take really seriously. I want to hear your thoughts and reflections. We have like a template that I can send people to be like, here are some questions to reflect on so that we can have the conversation. But my framing that I typically start with, Adrian, is like, what are the things you like? What are the things you don't like? What's important to you over the next 3 to 5 years, to like push people's thinking a little bit beyond the immediate term. And because sometimes like what you get back in those two sets of questions is like really disparate. And it's like, okay, cool, let's talk about that. Let's figure out how to connect the dots. And I like asking that question because I think it helps push people's thinking a little bit, but also like helps them take a longer view and know that like I want to take a longer view for them, even if it's like not a job that would be on my team. Like that's not limited to how I want to support their growth and development.
Yeah. For you, right, looking at your role, right, how do you now look at your next steps, keeping the goal in mind? Do you feel, hey, you need to have a little bit more HR experience to like really broaden that kind of like experience and depth, or be VP of talent, right? Like how do you look at your own career? And what are maybe some of the conversations that you're having with Craig, right?
Totally. No, and I'm smiling because I'm like, and I'm struggling to like answer my immediate term question, because I'm like, okay, I've been very intentional about, and sometimes I think like the important thing is to know like when you're in fact finding, like when you're in information collection mode, and I feel like I'm definitely in information collection mode. Like I'm new to talent, right? I've been in this seat for approaching a year, which is crazy. But like I'm not the expert in talent, right? Like I've kind of grown up as an HR business partner. And so I think that's like inherent to my DNA and how I interact with the business and how I lead. And I'm very much enjoying like building the skill and the muscle to say, all right, like how do we build an at scale recruiting organization? How in the advent of AI do we like continue to drive innovation within our recruiting organization, and learning that from the folks around me who are total experts in that. So I'm kind of focused on like building that craft to think about, because I think that ultimately like there's a variety of different paths you can take to get to the chief people officer seat. It depends on where you like what kind of company you want it at, depends on the leadership team and what they prioritize. I have always been a believer in the like tours of duty approach, which is part of how I ended up in talent. I think like there's so much value that comes from rotating through the different disciplines and understanding like what's important in each of them. But so yeah, I'm building out my kind of my arsenal of skills in the talent space, and excited to kind of strengthen and deepen that to inform what I want to do next.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you seek mentors? Like how did that play a role in your career, and also like how you think about your next steps?
Yeah. I think that I've always sought out mentors like intentionally, but organically. Like I've never like
Mhm.
signed up to be a part of a mentorship program, and I've tried to build them a couple places and like had some success, like some learnings along the way. I think the people that are most influential in my career from a mentorship perspective are the ones that I have developed those relationships with organically just by like working around or working for. Like there's a couple people that come to mind here, a couple people at Citadel who are still the people I would like, call for career advice when I'm thinking about making my next step. And so I would say, I think just like my general philosophy is like have the humility to like know what you don't know and where you can learn that from other people and approach it with an interest and a curiosity and oftentimes a willingness. Like I think in a work setting, what's helped me build some of those relationships is by showing up for the people who I want, who maybe I haven't even realized I want them to mentor me, but showing up to like deliver for them and help like add value to whatever their day-to-day mandate is. I think that like makes then asking the question of like, hey, what do you think I should do with my career? Like it makes it a little bit easier because you've built credibility and trust with that person and you've hopefully added some value to their day to day. So that's kind of how I've approached it. Versus like really formally labeling it. Cause I think when you formally label it, it can feel like a little bit
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
So I've gone the guerrilla approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of networking, like, are you very intentional of like going to a lot of networking events and like, like some of the people that are out there that might be able to help you and progress, or is that something that just happens organically?
I'm trying to be more intentional. You helped me be more intentional. This is why I came to your dinner and I was like, okay, Lizzie, we're doing more of
Let's
this.
do it. Let's do it. Yes.
Um, and Adrian's dinners are really fun for plug for everyone to know.
Great.
Great place to network. I try and like, a couple times a year, like be intentional about like going to something that seems like it would be high value from a networking perspective, but then also like, and I should do way better of a job of this, but like I've worked with some incredible people in HR and talent over the course of my career. And
Yeah.
I think developing great depth of relationships with those people, regardless of what industries they move into, and like maintaining those connections, whether they move into like consumer tech or stay in finance or other things like, move into healthcare. Like I think those deep connections stay deep connections. But I want to lead more by example by like being willing to just kind of make some of those connections. I think the other thing though that has been helpful for me is like I think if you have strong business relationships, your business partners will link you in with people that you should know, and that is a
Yeah.
helpful way of expanding the network.
Yeah. Yeah. To kind of like wrap up the conversation, Lizzie, if you could give one advice in terms of other people that are listening, like what advice would you give? Should you be very ambitious? Should you be outspoken? Should you, like what's now looking back of where you are in the journey that you're on? Like what is something that you learned over these last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will borrow from Greg Garrison, who's our VP of talent, who
Great.
has been, I think, really helpful
Yeah.
for me. Like, I think Greg helped me think about there's always a fine line, a fine balance to strike of like when you're pitching something to an organization. Like a couple of the roles I've had at Coinbase are jobs I pitched Coinbase on.
Yeah.
But I think that part of the reason I was able to succeed in doing that is it's important to frame things in the context of how it will add value to the business. So
Yeah.
you're always striking a
Mm,
balance of the competing priorities that are your own development and like what's good for the business, what's gonna drive it forward. So making sure that you're like keeping both of those priorities in mind, I think is a good recipe for success when you're trying to ask for something that might seem bold. I think it's a helpful grounding tactic.
I love that example because I remember a good friend of mine. He worked for Heineken. And
Cool.
he always had this entrepreneurial bug. He was like a senior marketing manager. And at a certain point, he wrote his own job description within Heineken because what he noticed is that Heineken was losing a lot of market share of these like small startup microbreweries. And he wrote his own job description of being one of those microbreweries under the umbrella of Heineken to give him some budget and give him a team to develop some of these smaller kind of like cool flavor and like hip, different branding, kind of different brands. And if one of them would really pick up and like hit home, then they could put it on the train of Heineken's distribution. That rule didn't exist, but it was an issue that they were dealing with, and he just saw the opportunity, create his own job description, and 6 months later, he was running a 10-people team of like, launching all these mini microbreweries. And it was such a testament of that you can really create your own opportunity in a way, if you just think about it and think about what the business needs, right? Because there was a clear business need, and here there was something that senior leadership was really struggling with.
I love that example. I'm like, what a cool job to pitch.
Such a cool job to pitch.
Such a cool job. But like, and it's such a good example of, because I think that like, I'm sure you will identify with the moment of like someone comes to you and they're like, hey, I want to do this. And you're like, that's great. I love that for you. But there is like, so clearly not a need for that in this moment. And so like, I think there's an element of reading the room, and it's infinitely more exciting when you can spot an opportunity that people haven't spotted yet. I had the great fortune of doing that with, when I first moved to the UK to be our kind of EMEA HR business partner, because I looked at our team and I said, we have 350 people in EMEA and we don't have anyone local on the HR team. So I pitched that, and you kind of have to like find the right opportunity, find an organization that's going to be supportive of that level of like risk taking and innovation. But I mean, that inspired me.
And that's how you ended up in London, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So
exactly. So yeah, I think that's a great example of like tie those two things together, because you need both.
So understand what the business needs, act upon it, and create your own destiny, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Whoa, powerful.
What a great way to wrap up. Lizzie, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you so much for being open. Thank you for just articulating, as the saying goes, if you aim for the moon, you might not make it, but at least you're amongst the stars, right? Like that's what it is. That's what it is.
There we have it. I love it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Adrian. This was so much fun. It's great to see you.
Ciao.
Bye.